Let's take the file sales 2013 _ no arrows to look at how we would add our own dependent and precedent arrows and how to get rid of them. Now in a particular sheet, you can pick on a cell, go to the formulas ribbon, and you'll see there's a formula auditing section where we can trace precedents and trace dependents. Now if I, for example, pick on B6 and choose trace dependents, I get a message to say that there are no dependents on this cell. That in itself can be quite a useful thing to find out. If I stay on the same cell but choose trace precedents, see that it highlights the range above with a dot and an arrow to point to this cell. So I can see graphically where the data is coming from that feeds into this cell. Q1 total, trace precedents, it's getting its totals from these cells here. If I highlight a number of cells, so I'm interested in all these sum quarters and choose trace precedents, you can see that it simply does the first cell. So it's not a multiple cell command. You need to choose the next one, trace precedents, and the next one, trace precedents, and the next one, trace precedents. The reason it doesn't work with multiple cells is ideally you wouldn't want your sheet covered in all these arrows, as we've done there, as it makes it a little harder to read for starters. These are really meant for troubleshooting. So you're tracing an error backwards, forwards through the sheet to try and find out where the problem might be. So again, a single cell, trace dependents, and you can see the only cell dependent on this one is the total at the end. So you simply select a cell and decide whether you want to trace its dependents or trace its precedents. If you need to remove some arrows, because we've got a little crazy there, we can either click the remove arrows option and that will remove all of them, or there is a drop down arrow where you can choose to either remove just the precedent arrows or the dependent arrows. So let's remove the precedent arrows, and the dependent arrows then remain. So now we're seeing cells and their dependencies. So we're being fed in. These values go into there, these values go into there. If I then want to remove the dependent arrows as well, come back to the drop down and choose remove dependent arrows. Although in this case, removing all arrows will have the same effect. So this will work on any sheet. Where a sheet is being linked to another sheet, for example this cell here, this is just a straightforward value, but it's likely to have dependents. So I click trace dependents and we can see that the Q1 total for North and the total for January is dependent upon it, as is a value in another sheet. If I need to follow this through, I just get right to the end of the arrow there and double click. That brings up the go to box. I can then choose the cell that is dependent upon this one. OK, and that takes me to it. So therefore I can trace right through the workbook if it gets lots of intersheet linking to try and hopefully solve the problem of the error that I'm generating.